And welcome to episode 33 of the Brewed Sages, Stormbound players with a head for the game. I am Freeloader, and with me, as always, is Sabaiku. Sabaiku, how's it going tonight?
Fantastic.
We are the Brewed Sages, easily the second best Stormbound related podcast in production. And as a reminder, you can always follow us at Brewed Sages on Twitter. Or for all of you who couldn't decide between Transformers and GoBots, our email address is thebrewedsages@gmail.com. So, Sabaiku, this week we have some community news. This is going to be a new thing we're going to try to do more often to give our listeners some idea about the breadth. I mean, and it is a broad swath of things going on in the community.
And I would like to take this time to introduce our new senior sports correspondent, Dirk. Dirky has been kind enough to help us out with this as somebody heavily involved in the tournament scene and an experienced equals player in their own right. Dirk is going to be helping us out with a roundup of the ongoing tournaments and contests that are happening through the Discord. So if you're hearing this and you're interested, get yourself to the Discord, contact Dirk if you have any questions, and take it away, Freeloader.
So, first up is Draftbound. We've mentioned this already. This is the creation of Reckless. You get 3 random cards to choose from. Repeat that 12 times. You've now created your draft deck. In the first round, or the first tournament that's currently running, Thomas Petrie, who again has just started to play Equals, this is actually their first ever tournament, and MKM are fighting for a place in the finals against Helios. Helios is waiting for the winner. After those last two fights have been fought, Draftbound will actually turn into a weekly contest instead of a big long tournament. Go into the official Discord server. There is a link there on Sheepyard's social media accounts and all the rest of that. You can sign up for the weekly Draftbound. The first week starts in June, so I think the last day for sign up is going to be the 31st of May. So get on it, folks. There's only a few days left to sign up. Moving on from there, we have faction heroes. You pick a faction. Then you try to beat as many people in the same faction as possible. So if you like playing Swarm, you get to play Mirrors of Swarm to your heart's content. The top 2 from each faction will then fight for the title of the faction hero. First and second places, who will be fighting for the faction hero title, for Swarm and Winter, seem to already be clear. For Ironclad and Shadowfen, it can still change, so it's still up for grabs. For Winter, it will be Lucifer and the Singularity. For Swarm, it will be between Dennis, who's another first-time Equals player, and Vox. This tournament will also most likely be turning into a weekly contest sometime very soon. Next up, we have the Collectors Tournament. In the Collectors Tournament, you get a randomly generated deck to begin with. Then after every win, you get to pick 1 or 2 cards, depending upon if the win was 2-0 or 2-1, from your opponent's deck. How insane is that? You literally collect cards from them. This tournament has just started a few days ago. So far, Dennis, who's the same Dennis mentioned in the Faction Heroes tournament, has managed to beat Arthas Rue, who is, in his own right, an amazing Equals player, former Brewed Sage himself, in round 1. Round 2 is showing mostly 2-0 wins, which is not weird considering that the decks were all generated randomly. And there does seem to be some people who got a little lucky with their randomly generated deck in the first place. From there, we also have Faction Wars. This is different than Faction Heroes. In Faction Wars, you pick a faction. So again, let's say Swarm. You then fight against the other factions. So no more mirror matches. You fight together with everyone who has chosen the same faction as you. So you're all on the same team, Team Swarm. This weekly contest will be starting up again soon. It was a thing last spring and summer, I believe, but it kind of went dark for a little bit. It's been just about 6 months. There's going to be a post in the Sheepyard social media account on the 31st. So look for that coming up. That's a ton of fun. Everybody who used to do it really enjoyed it. So I highly recommend trying that contest out. Give it a shot. So with all of that, and gosh, very, very short notice on a lot of them, May 31st is coming up very quickly. But with all of that out of the way, let's go into our main topic, which is patch notes. So, Sabaiku, I hear tell that the patch notes dropped.
Indeed, they did. So we have the usual round of balance changes,
Mm,
some new
mm, mm.
cards. We have some progression and economy changes this time around.
Do tell.
So let's dive right in. Let's start with the balance changes. The big one that we think will impact the meta the most, unstable build is getting nerfed and now will inflict 3 damage per turn to itself instead of 2. Uh, Unstable build recently, relatively recently, probably about 6 or 7 months ago at this point, was
Mm-hmm.
increased in strength up to 9 at level 5. At 9 strength, taking 2 damage a turn, it could just sit there for 5 turns if your opponent didn't put any units into it. Now, it'll only sit for 3 turns, and more importantly, after it takes 1 tick of damage, it's only 6 strength, which is relatively easy to clear, at least at level 5. Um, you'll be able to put Destructobots into it, for example, and just knock it down to a to a state where it's going to remove itself the next turn. Now your opponent can't set this up as easily. It'll still hold their front, but they can't set up the Hearthguard's damage as easily.
Mm-hmm.
And at lower levels, at level 1, level 2, 5 or 6 strength, this is taking 1 tick of damage and then it's gone the next turn. It's not lasting long at all. I gotta say, I really like this. I think it's a fantastic way to decrease the strength of the card without reverting the previous buff, which was maybe a little too much. 9 strength for 2 mana at level 5 is a lot, a real lot. But this mitigates that effect a little bit and makes it a little bit more of a temporary structure, like it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I mean, there were definitely times where I would have things happen, like my opponent would drop it in front of my opener and just let my opener crash into it and die, and then still have a tower to work with the following turn for things like Fort Tonic. That's just crazy. Like, I smashed 2 mana into it, and it's still hanging around for another turn. This feels a lot better to me. There are still it's still a 2 mana structure, which means that using it with Fort Tonic, using it with Hearthguards, in the same turn is still the most feasible, right? The next cheapest would be like Fort of Ebonrock. So it is still the most economical structure to pair with your other things. The nice thing about it now is that Sheepyard's change is forcing it to become something you have to really cycle together to be able to predictably have it to enable the other combo piece, right?
Yeah.
Right now, it doesn't, like, you could be half cycle off from each other. You just lay it on the board and say, clear it. Otherwise, sooner or later, I'm drawing into my combo.
Yep. Definitely something that you have to try to work to combo rather than just jam it on the board and assume it'll stick around.
This feels good. I have felt like this has been the most problematic Ironclad card ever since Fort Tonic got nerfed, and Ironclad didn't budge. It just said, well, we'll get rid of Fort Tonic and put Hearthguards in, and ta-da, we're still super powerful.
And I do like the fact that Ironclad is able to leverage structures in a way that other factions can't, right? Like
Hmm. Hmm.
it's a good part of the faction identity, with Mia, with the wide assortment of structures that you can use. Hearthguard seems to be a natural fit into that theme also, but I think that unstable was kind of a bit too much, and all the other structures really have fallen out of favor. It feels like
Yes.
this one still sees play in pretty much every Ironclad deck. Definitely everyone that I've played against in the last couple months. So doing something to make it just a little less prevalent, I think, is appreciated.
Yeah, I agree. The only other thing I was going to say was just I have seen Ironclad rush decks that just love it because it's a 2 mana cycle card, right? Like, it holds your front. It's effectively a tank that holds your front for 2 mana. And again, I don't think you can abuse it quite as badly now. This feels good all the way around. I think this is probably right where I think we finally hit the sweet spot with this card. Let's put it there. Let's see what happens. I'm very optimistic. I know I'm not always optimistic about their changes. This one makes me feel good. Moving on.
Speaking of structures that have fallen out of favor,
Fallen out of favor.
Venomfall Spire is getting a buff up from 3, 4, 4, 6, 7 strength to 4, 5, 5, 7, 8 strength. So mana still stays at 4, but the strength is increased by 1 across the board. And now poison is back in the meta.
No.
Poison is probably not back in the meta.
I think it's interesting that they chose to keep the strength jump from 3 to 4 of 2 strength.
When it increases the target from levels 2 to 3, the strength doesn't increase, but then you make up for it going from level 3 to 4. And I don't know why. Doesn't make sense to me either.
Sure.
The strength is good now. It's
Yeah.
comparable to the 3 mana structures, like for an upgrade point, and the ability still does what it does, but what it does just kind of isn't really powerful enough at high levels to make it something that you'll see competitively. You'll see some meme decks based around it. Maybe this helps you out if you're trying to play it like at level 3 in
Yeah. Okay.
silver or gold, in lower levels where the one strength tick from poison actually matters a little more, right? As you increase the strength of each unit, when gifted recruits is 2 strength, taking 1 off of it is a 50% reduction. That's huge. When gifted recruits is 5 strength, taking 1 off of it is a 20% reduction. That doesn't matter as the the units increase in strength and mana cost from there. It's less and less relevant.
I feel like Venom Fall Spire on its own didn't necessarily need a buff because its play rate isn't about itself. Its play rate is about the viability of poison, and I don't feel this changes that.
Yeah, it's poison synergies are decent, but not good enough right now. Maybe this is preparation for changes to Amber Heights or Marked as Prey or new cards that interact with poison differently.
Sure.
But for right now, this makes Venom Fall something that you now can just set down and worry a little bit less about your opponent clearing, right? So if you're
Sure.
trying to set up poison synergy, it's just a little more likely to last until next turn. The problem is the payoff isn't there in the game right now.
Yeah, and it's still 4 mana. So if I was just looking for a tower to help hold front in like a rush deck or an aggressive mid range deck, I'm probably still using Fort of Ebonrock over this, right?
Unless you're really trying to make an Amber Hides rush deck work.
Probably not. All right, what else you got?
Former card of the week, Joust Champion. Mana cost
Ooh.
goes down from 8 to 7.
Hmm. Okay. Okay.
Now, I want to say I love this change for one very important reason, and that's at level 5. Joust Champions is 7 strength and deals 7 additional damage to any unit that it attacks. 7 mana, so it's 777. Beautiful, well aligned. I like it. We're done here.
Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
So the obvious comparison now for Joust Champions at 7 is Salty Outcast, right? Like another 7 mana, 2
Uh,
movement.
okay.
Salty has better strength when attacking the base, but Joust Champions defensively, assuming that everything lines up perfectly, you can do 14 damage for 7 mana and then still leave a 7 strength body on the board afterward. Like, that's pretty good, but it requires your opponent to play columns of units like Zuri, and this comes too late for stopping a Zuri on turn 5. This is a response to somebody who's played Doppelbox and then Zuri, or played Wild Saber Paws and then Zuri. It'll let you do some work to clear that off, but you're clearing it off for the same amount of mana that they spent on it. You're not getting an efficiency upgrade there. So I don't know how much play it'll really see. It's still better than Twilight Prowlers, I think, because you can use it in the middle of the board. You can use it anywhere. Twilight Prowlers is just a baseline defender. So even though Twilight Prowlers has a ton of strength, it doesn't necessarily do as much, is not as flexible.
Yeah, it only on your baseline. Like if you're getting partially base locked, which in all honesty, if that's happening to you, you're probably losing the game anyway. But as a Hail Mary to try to win that game, I guess you would still prefer Twilight Prowlers because of the 3 movement.
Yep.
But I agree with you. I think you're right. The other thing I will say is at 8 mana, this felt too much like a poor man's Siren.
Yes. And now it's significantly different from Siren. It's significantly cheaper. I don't know if it's quite enough, but I will say at least it feels balanced now.
Yeah, I like the card. So I'm not using Salty Outcast much anymore either. Cards on the table, as it were. Pardon the pun. Um, so I don't know how much this is going to see play because I haven't really been in the market for a 7 mana runner lately. But I think it's much more enticing now than it was at 8. I wish it did a little more face damage. A max level Saber Paws for 2 mana deals 5. This only deals 2 more. But its flexibility makes it certainly worth something.
So a few months ago, I actually upgraded my Salty Outcast to level 5 and just used it in a variant of your winter deck as a finisher, just a chunk of 10 damage. And it was fine. It worked well enough.
Oh,
Joust Champions can't do that. It doesn't do a chunk of damage. It is definitely a more control oriented card.
hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if you're playing a deck that's slower and control oriented, I don't know that you necessarily want Joust Champions in there over something like Siren or even over something like Crazy Bombers, which will do a ton of surrounding damage and isn't quite so geographically limited, right? Like Joust Champions, those 2 units need to be bordering each other for it to work. Crazy Bombers, you can just kind of, throw down and do a bunch of damage everywhere.
I'll throw this card out as a basis of comparison. I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but it's what popped into my head was Tiger, right? So Tiger can at 6 mana actually does 8 to face as a runner, so it does 1 damage more. But then the rest of the value from it just kind of comes all over the place. At best, it can do is 20 because it can deal 8 to the face and then give 12 strength to one of your units. So it actually is fairly competitive in terms of value that you can get out of it, albeit in a very different board state. And I'm trying to decide if there's an argument to be made that if you play Tigor a lot of times defensively in the mid game to try to save yourself, if you've got a deck where Tigor is your finisher, but also you end up playing it a lot to like save your bacon, might playing Joust Champions be a superior choice in those situations for that particular deck?
Maybe. Again, Tigre, when it does the random damage to a unit, can do so across the board. It can do it anywhere.
Oh, right. That's a good point.
Joust Champions, again, is limited by positioning. And
Hmm.
that makes it like really good against Zuri, like I said before, but not so good against most other things. Tigor's advantage is that you can get a really good high roll and you can get a really bad low roll also. Like the RNG makes it a little more fun to play,
Mm-hmm.
and whereas this is not fun to play.
All right. So maybe we see play on it, maybe we don't, but as it stands, it's at least separated from Siren a bit, which is good.
Yeah, and that I do want to just say to close it out, it feels good. I don't know if it'll see play, but that doesn't mean that it's not balanced. It feels good the way that it is, and I think if you threw it in your kind of slower, heavy mid range or light control deck, you're probably gonna say, yeah, that's a solid card. It's fine.
So moving on from there to Trekking Aldermen.
An increase in strength at the top few levels. Levels 1 and 2 are not changed. Levels 3, 4, and 5 get one extra strength. So now it's just a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 across the board as you level it up. The ability remains unchanged. It's going to distribute, if it survives an attack, it'll distribute some damage across the board. The problem is it still maxes out at 4 random damage to enemy units on the board, which just doesn't really feel like enough. Like the body's good now. The body is in line with other 3 mana cards like Excited Mousers or Sound Drivers or Harpies of the Hunt or
Harpies of
Mindless
the Hunt.
Horde. Are
Yeah.
those both?
Yep.
I think those both top out at 8, but they
I
have
think
no
that's correct.
ability.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good buff in that it's now commensurate with its peers. I think the ability is fine, and that's probably what's going to keep it from seeing play.
Well, shout out to Critical Pancake. He had designed a Shadowfen deck that like he popularized the idea of using Harpies of the Hunt as a include tech card to counter scrapped planners. And this would now do that for what it's worth.
Ooh, only a scrapped planners that has survived a trade. That's the biggest difference, right? Harpies of the Hunt counters a full strength scrapped.
That is true. That is true. Although you don't normally see a lot of naked scrapped planners played, right? Normally you see them played into a trade for a reason.
Sure, yeah.
So now Trekking Alderman can counter that. Granted, you don't get any value out of it, but to your point, I don't know how much value you really should put on 4 random damage to enemy units. Yeah, I feel like at like if you're playing it at level 5, in all likelihood you're playing against other level 5 cards. It's really hard to imagine how 4 random damage spread across a board is going to really impact a game.
Yeah, so it can soften up your opponent's stuff on the board so that
Mm,
you can trade into it more favorably. Maybe you win some trades that you otherwise wouldn't. Maybe you make trades with less mana than you would have. Right now, I don't need to put my toad into a unit to kill it. I can put gifted into it, and that leaves me 2 extra mana to do something else. Right?
yeah,
That's
no, that's true.
that's kind of a best case scenario here. Maybe if you wanted to run this as a anti-toad card, you see a lot of Rain of Frogs, you see a lot of Azure Hatchers, you stick this on the board and now they disappear.
But isn't Beasts of Terror just better because you at least know then that you're getting all of them? I mean, you know what I mean? Like you can play Rain and have something like Helios on the board or Witches on the board, and Trekking Alderman could just randomly put 2 or 3 of its 4 pings into a big body that,
Just
still
soaks
ain't
it
gonna
up,
die.
and then all those toads are left alive. Yeah, you're right. You would rather play Beast of Terror in that situation. Um, like you said, make sure that all the toads are cleared out, not relying on the random damage. The fact that it costs 1 extra mana really isn't particularly relevant. I think that it's just a better choice in that situation if that's the kind of tech card that you're looking for.
I wonder if Trekking Alderman would see play if it wasn't enemy units, but just random enemies.
Oh,
I
yeah,
don't.
it would see a ton of play if it could ping to the enemy base.
Well, yeah, but randomly, you have no control over where those go.
Well, you can control that by clearing out the rest of the board a little bit.
Well, that's a good point. For 3 minutes, that's probably too cheap.
Because for 3 mana, you can fit this in, pretty much any turn.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You could do some work there, especially in the early game. If your opponent plays something for 3 mana, say they only have Saber Paws to open the game. If you can move up with green prototypes and stick this in front of it, you eat their Saber Paws, do 4 damage to their base, and the game starts off on an unequal footing right off the bat like that. That's hard.
I kind of like that, though. I'll be honest.
I would play it. Yeah. But as it is, just pinging the board, it's, like you said, it's kind of meh.
So, remind me on timing on this, and we might not know the answer. This might need some play testing afterwards to answer. But if my opponent opens with a Shady Ghoul, and I respond with Green Proto Trekking Alderman, does the Trekking Alderman, and I stick the Trekking Alderman obviously in front of the Shady Ghoul, does the Trekking Alderman clear? or does it do 4 damage to nothing and then the spawn appears?
I believe that it will do 4 damage to nothing, and then the spawn will appear because
Gosh,
the on death effect will trigger after the elder takes damage.
man. Okay, so it's
And that's because because trekking alderman doesn't have movement, it is always going to be getting attacked into.
right, right, correct. All right. Well, let's move on from that one to probably the most debated in the Discord right now. Nerf, buff, burf. I guess everyone's calling it a burf.
Yeah, this one's kind of tough to categorize. I'd be happy to call it a burf. If Counselor Ahmi is played with no surrounding enemies, it will come back as a copy to your hand. But now the copy will come back to your hand with +1 strength. It will gain 1 strength every time it comes back to hand, so you can start stacking strength buffs on Counselor Ami. If you play it next to, if you play it surrounding an enemy unit, the additional strength is lost, and the next draw will go back to the original strength. The base strength is now decreased by 1 at every level. So it's a 3 mana 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to start. If you open the game with it, your next copy will be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on and so on. Yeah, this is a weird one. So the strength is down on the first copy you play. The strength
Mm-hmm.
is back to normal on the second copy you play, and the strength is +1 on the third copy. So if you can play Ami 3 times without playing it next to a surrounding enemy, you break even on what the strength currently is. It's just like you play 3 counselor Amis right now, essentially.
Okay, that's one way to look at it. Yeah, I see what you're saying. It's notable though that it's a lot harder to do that because currently it's bordering, not surrounding.
Correct.
That's been actually one of the big complaints in the Discord has been the increased difficulty of getting Ami to proc correctly.
Which is true. I mean, look, the board gets crowded later in the game, and later in the game is when you really want to continue stacking Ami's strength buffs so that you can basically use it to seal the game. It's something that you do have to play back on your baseline or close to it because just chances are good your enemy's going to have stuff on the board if you don't do it that way.
Potentially, or all their stuff may be forward. Just you play this along their baseline 3 times.
Sure, that is definitely possible. I have a feeling you're winning that game regardless of what you're playing, though.
That's also probably true. It is worth noting, I have not been able to get a straight answer on this. I asked the question. Um, so if I play Ami like 3 or 4 times correctly, and so now I've got this big Ami, and I decide for whatever reason that the board state is such that I don't want to play another Ami for a while. So I'm just going to cycle the card into my deck and draw back to it later. I don't know what the state of the card is going to be when I draw it again.
I I interpret these notes as it will be cycled away with the strength buff and it will come back to your hand eventually with the strength buff because you have not played it surrounding anything on the board. You've just moved the card back into your deck. But again, that's my interpretation of reading it, not from having played with it at all.
Correct. That's my interpretation as well. And again, I don't know what the use case would be when you're suddenly thinking, I have this 3 mana 9/1.
Well, yeah, the use case there is that you cannot put it on the board without touching a surrounding unit, and you don't want to do that. You don't want to lose those strength buffs you've accumulated. So you're like, I'm just going to throw it away, play Broken Truce or whatever, and come back to it later.
Oh, good point. Yeah, no, I like that. Yeah, I'm going to throw it away, find another unit with movement to play some defense. We're going to clear as best we can. And then when we get it back, I've got a 3 mana 8/1 again.
Now, the question is, how do you use this, right? Like,
What's a control deck for sure?
is it, I certainly said Broken Truce there. It seems like something you want to do in combination with removal so that you can keep the board clear and just slowly build up Amis to the point where your opponent just can't deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you want to get to the point where you're literally playing 4 or 5 Amis in a turn, right? Like you want the game to stretch out to manas 12 through 18 kind of a thing. And if Broken Truce needs to be played, you put 4 mana into that, and that, or Hunter's Vengeance even, because honestly, how big are your Amis at this point? Do you even care if Hunter's Vengeance is played?
Only two of them will get it. It's fine.
Right, exactly. And then you just spam Amis the rest of your mana. If your goal is to make it to that late in the game, then I think it has to be a control deck.
Yeah, you could certainly try to go the other way with it, where everything else in the deck is very cheap, and this is essentially your finisher. You put your opponent back on their heels, trying to defend against your strong swarm rush, and then all of a sudden it's 6 mana. You throw two Amis down further back on the board. Next turn you play two more, and your opponent is now all of a sudden getting overwhelmed by huge units that they're not ready to defend because they've been working against your rush up to that point. I don't know if that'll work. If that's a direction I feel like I want to take it.
I
Just because
like it.
Swarm is not a class that is particularly well suited to control, although, Dark Harvest and Broken Truce can definitely do some work.
No, I like this idea. The more you're talking me through it, it's starting to make some sense to me. Especially because, well, you don't need a big unit. Ami is the big unit, right? Like I don't need to put a 5 mana 10-1 in the deck to be a tank or a pressure point. I've got a 3 mana card that will be a 10-1 soon enough. Okay.
5 quick plays away, and you'll get that 10-1.
Hey, that's one on turn one, one on turn two.
I mean, look, we've talked about Ami on this podcast before, and basically what we said is no one is excited about playing West Wind Sailors over and over and over again.
That's
It
true.
it's better than that now. I think I'm not sure. The first one you play is worse than that, but the second one you play is at least on par with that, and it gets up from there. And I think you're going to be able to find ways to creatively and innovatively use this, and let it kind of take over a game.
Yeah, I think so. I think Dark Harvest might want to play in this deck, and the reason is because you want to play Ami away from your opponent's units. You're going to play them like 2 rows away, so that Ami steps forward and is now bordering your opponent's units, right?
Sure, that makes sense. And now all of a sudden your Dark Harvest is a clear, can do some work. It's just a lot of mana,
Yeah, well, it is a lot of mana.
especially if you have to play Ami twice in order to get the positioning that you need.
Yeah, okay,
It's
maybe
tough.
it's not
I
such
don't
a good
know.
idea.
I really don't know. It's going to be interesting to play with. But I've This is a card that I've gotten a ton of copies of, so it is pretty solidly level 4 for me. So I'll be happy to try to use it at level 4 and see what happens. Yeah, I don't know if it's going to be able to keep up with the value generation from other mid-range decks, right? Like, can this actually keep up with a Bragda deck or a Zuri deck where there's a big one-turn power spike and you're left kind of slowly trying to build up your value over time instead? It's a different way of looking at the game. It's a different way of playing the game, and whether or not it can compete, I'll be interested to test out.
I will say Bragda might give it a lot of difficulty just because Azure Hatcher and Rain are 2 cards that you might want to play just as counters to Ami to prevent your opponent from having space to play it, right?
Yeah, just clog up the board on them.
That's what they
Yeah.
do. All right, so moving on from there, that's it for our buffs and nerfs. Next, we have some new cards. We get 2 new cards this coming month, Subaiku.
And we're going to do these in chronological order, not in the order of the patch notes. The first card is coming out on June 4th, and that'll be Headless Hotheads, a
Mm,
5 mana construct, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 strength, and 2 movement, but a different kind of movement than we have seen before. On play, move fixedly forward. It will not turn to the side and attack units to the side. It will just move forward 2 spaces.
it knows where it wants to go. It knows the place, Subaiku. You know what
It
the
wants
place
to
is?
go to face. This is a
That's
smork card all the way. It can move
love
your
this.
front so that you can get in range of your opponent's base, or it just goes in itself. 7 damage for 5 is fine. If you get this up to level 5, it's as
It's as strong as Joust Champions.
it, the whole way it's as strong as Blue Sail Raiders, which is
Hmm.
a fine pirate card, a decent enough runner that does see some play. Blue Sail will go to the side, so you can use it a little more flexibly, right? Like you can use it defensively if you want to. You can use it to move sideways and then up to put a unit on your opponent's baseline. This will not do that. This is just going to move forward too every time, so your opponent can't defend against it in the same way either. So they're both going to fill different roles, and which one you want in your deck kind of depends on how you want to play. I really love this card. I don't know if this card is actually going to see a ton of play. Blue Sail doesn't see a ton of play either, just because the mana cost is a little high and the strength is kind of just not quite enough on that. But this mechanic is amazing. I love that they're introducing different movement mechanic to the game, and I can't wait to see what they do with it in the future.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you with this. I don't know if I love this card. I do know that I love this mechanic. I love the idea of, one of the things that makes Stormbound very, very unique in the world of digital card games is the board, positioning, proximity, all of these kinds of concepts, movement, different directions, push, pull, all of these mechanics that are already in the game make it really endearing and very unique, because you learn about, playing cards with mana, from a lot of different places. The idea of them diving into this kind of space in this area that they're so unique in, this movement on the board idea, I love it. Let's go further. Let's make a lot of cards that play in this space.
Absolutely.
This one in particular, I think you're right. The mana cost, there's so much competition for super powerful 5 drops right now.
Well, no, we talked about earlier, 2 episodes ago, four
Yes.
episodes ago, we talked about
There's
how there's not enough 5 mana cards in the game. So I'm actually happy that they're introducing it here and taking uh, another stab at making a 5 mana card that maybe is worthwhile.
No, I agree that there's not enough 5 mana cards in the game. That was from Kitty produced that graph. Um, I was saying there's so much competition for like the super powerful 5 drop. I'm thinking Loris, I'm thinking Ubis, I'm thinking Butchers, I'm thinking Zuri. There's the 5 drop spot. There's not a lot of options, but the options that are there are a lot of very heavy hitters, and so this is going into an octagon fight with some big old boys. The one thing I will say is, even in a rush deck, the rush of rush decks, Reckless Rush, you play Doppelbox. In part because for the mana, it's just good value, but it's not really a value deck, right? You play it because a lot of times all you really need to do to win is scoot your front around what your opponent has played for defense. And Doppelbox is one of the very few cards in the game that can do that. We've just seen that another card like that is being introduced. I love this.
Yeah, and obviously the biggest difference between this and Doppelbox is the mana cost.
Mm-hmm.
Doppelbox you can use a lot more flexibly because it's 2 mana. You can fit it into your turn. This is 5. It's a much bigger investment, especially in a rush deck that is looking to close the game out by 7 or 8 mana. But maybe this is something you put over the top in your rush deck just because your opponent can't defend it in the same way.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking for factions that don't have Doppelbox at the ready. I know
Yeah.
in Shadowfen, you and I, we use Azure Hatcher sometimes for the same kind of purpose, just to crash it into something and get it to spawn and move our front around the opponent's defense. So I wish I could pay only 2 mana, but I'm already willing to pay 4 mana for this kind of feature in a rush deck. Might Winter or Ironclad, who don't even have access to that, might they be interested?
No, you might be right. I hope that people can get this leveled up relatively soon and test it out and see how it works.
It is a rare, so it'll be a little while before I have it leveled up for sure.
Yep.
All right, moving on. Next, Eternal Ethereals.
An 8 mana card, so a heavy hitter, but with 3 movement
Ooh,
and an ancient tag instead of the construct tag that we saw for the headless hothead. The Eternal Ethereals have 5, 6, 7, 9, 11 strength, so relatively big, especially considering the movement involved, but expensive at 8 mana. The competition for a solid body with 3 movement, as we talked about earlier, is Siren. This is kind of a 1 mana discount on the Siren. Doesn't have the amazing legendary effect that Siren does, but an 11 strength common, you could definitely level this up and have it be a reasonable substitute as something that you play over the top to just deal a huge chunk of damage. One more mana than Salty Outcast, but one more strength and one more movement makes it a pretty solid value.
that was exactly the card I was thinking of comparing it to. Was if you play Salty Outcast right now, might this be a card you consider swapping in for it? Maybe. I don't know how much to value the extra damage. Right, that's the big question. 2 Salty Outcast hits is 20. Not a lot of opponents have more than 20 health.
It does happen on occasion.
Winter. Okay. 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 I'm warming up to it.
And we missed the obvious comparison there also by talking about Salty Outcast, but Sleet Stompers is a dwarf runner,
Oh yeah.
a race with lots of runners.
Mm-hmm.
12 strength for 2 movement. This is 1 less strength, 1 more movement. That's a typical balancing. I would definitely say the extra movement is worth losing 1 strength on something of this mana cost.
Yeah, for sure. The big thing about it is it's not about being able to necessarily tag your opponent from the midboard. It's the ability to make a small trade, like there's a 1 or 2 health or 3 health remnant on your opponent's second row, and being able to still hit face when your opponent has put something on their second row defensively is a premium skill.
Yep, yep. And 3 movement and a heavy body makes this something that I think could really see a lot of play. Not for the, like we talked about, not for the experienced players who have a well developed library and already have a high level Siren, but if you're a newer player, you only have 1 or 2 copies of Siren, you get a ton of copies of this instead because it's a common. Maybe you get this up to level 4 while your Siren's only at level 2, and you say, yeah, you know what? 1 mana cheaper, 9 strength. That seems pretty reasonable. I'll play that.
I would definitely do that. Yeah, for sure. If I wanted to play something like Cons Runners and I just wanted a more budget friendly list, yeah.
Yeah, I think that we are probably not the main demographic for this card. And I think it is probably geared toward newer players. And I think it'll work pretty well in that role.
Moving on from there, we now have what has been a little bit of a sky is falling fear going on. The victory coins update. The victory coins are going to be increased across the board in ranked matches. Subaiku, proportional to the league of the players. So starter, iron, bronze, silver, gold. They're all going to get 10 coins plus an additional 10 coins for watching the ad or having the premium pass. For them, nothing is changing, right?
So for gold and below, there is a change in that without watching the ad, you get 5 extra coins, right? Your total is
Oh,
still
that's right.
20, but if you don't have the premium pass, you get 10 without watching an ad instead of 5.
Huh,
And the
okay.
ad gives you a little bit less, which
Hmm.
seems fair. But in platinum, you get 15 coins for a win and 15 coins for watching an ad or having the premium pass. In diamond, that's 20 and 20 for a total of 40 coins per win. And in Heroes League, 25 and 25 for a total of 50 coins per win, over twice as much as what you're currently getting.
Yeah, that's insane. That is a huge difference in the amount of gold per win.
Now, this does not apply to Brawl. Brawl is going to be 10 and 10, same as Gold and Below.
That's fine. I don't really play Brawl to earn coins.
Oh, I play Brawl to spend coins, and now hopefully I'll have more coins to spend.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, This is going to definitely be helpful for resource generation. This is going to be helpful for the economy. But there's a downside.
Walk me through this downside.
The hero's chest now will give you 2,000 coins instead of 3,000 and 70 rubies instead of 100 rubies. So you lose 1,000 coins and 30 rubies from your end of season chest. The diamond chest, you will lose 300 coins, and that's it.
There was so much panic about this, and so many people got so upset over all of this. I want to give credit to where credit is due. Thomas Petrie, he posted on the Stormbound Reddit a fantastic set of graphs showing you the linear projection of coins gained for average wins per day, starting at 0 wins per day all the way up to 20 wins per day for Platinum, Diamond, and Heroes, compared pre May with May and then June, and showed that actually, if you're going to play and win at least 2 games a day, you're coming out ahead. Everybody who wins more than 2 games a day comes out significantly ahead from where they would have with the old system. And it's really impressive when you look at it graphically.
Sure, and that's fair, and we need to come out ahead because we do need more gold. Everybody needs more gold. It is the resource that you get the most of, but it's also the resource you spend the most of. And this just feels like two steps forward, one step back. We didn't need to have a nerf to the end of season rewards. We didn't need to get less for actually making the Heroes League. You could have just given us more gold on top of it. And why you had to take 30 rubies away on the side is, I don't understand that.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the rubies either. But I will say that to your point, I agree that you should get more gold for reaching the Heroes League, and in fact, now you do. The difference is you get more gold for making the Heroes League and continuing to play. If you step back from this and you just try to take a look at what are the developers trying to incentivize, there is a percentage of the player base, and gosh, I used to do this all the time. I'll take ownership of it. I used to make Diamond One and then just stop playing. If I had, I'd make Diamond One with like a week or 6, 7 days to go, something like that, maybe 5 days to go, and I just be like, oh, I made it. I'm done. Just gonna coast for the rest of the season. There's nothing more for me to fight for. That's fine. You're welcome to do that. But Sheepyard has a vested interest in trying to keep queue times low and their matchmaking system working as accurately as possible. In order for that to happen, they need people playing every day. And so that's what they're incentivizing here. They're not, I don't see this as penalizing you for being in the Heroes League, because holy smokes, you earn 50 gold, 2.5 times as much gold as you currently do.
And I'm not saying that it's a penalty. I am absolutely not saying that. It will be better next month than it was this month for
Mm-hmm.
everybody that can win more than 2 games a day. But the point is that you could have just given extra to the players without taking something away.
I agree. If again, what I'm reading into this is, and I don't know anything about this. This is just what I'm projecting. The message I'm taking away from this is we need you guys to play more. Like, thank you for getting this far, but we really just need everybody playing a little bit more all the time. Give us a game or two extra each day, please,
Especially at the higher levels.
especially at the higher levels, right?
Now, if you want to talk about incentives, this also definitely does incentivize people to have the premium pass because you're going to hit a 400 coin cap pretty quickly now by getting 50 coins per win instead of 20.
Oh gosh, yeah. Holy smokes, I didn't even consider this. That's 8 games. Wait, that's like a given night of playing. You're going to. Ooh,
I mean, ideally, yeah. And now
wow.
you'll start seeing that little pop up, "Hey, you've hit the cap for the day. Why don't you check out the premium pass to get more?"
Yeah, but to me, the bigger thing here is just like I know there's a lot of people currently in Diamond 1 and 2 posting, look, all that's happening is I'm queuing into the top 100 of the Heroes League right now. I'm not queuing into somebody who's just barely in the Heroes League. It's all the top players, and the reason for that is they're the only ones competing right now for anything, so they keep queuing up. And that's not like 100%, but a lot of the people who are in the bottom half of Heroes League, there's no compelling reason for them to queue anything up at this point. They're not trying for the number one spot. Their rewards are effectively locked in. So I like the idea of just kind of, this is to me an ask. This is an ask to the players. We're going to give you more. What we ask in return is just play a little bit more often so our matchmaking stays solid. And I'm comfortable with that. I don't know. This doesn't bother me.
It feels like a fair trade. It does.
The maxing out the coin cap though seems problematic. I was not planning, I'll be honest, I was not planning on paying for the premium pass this coming month. I guess I'm going to test it out and see how often that really happens first, and then maybe I go back to it in July.
Which makes sense. Like if you hit the coin cap 2 or 3 times a month, then you start thinking to yourself, "Hey, how much do I value $8 versus how much do I value those extra coins?" But for the most part, maybe you think, I only hit it once anyway, not really a big deal. That depends on you. That depends on how much you play, and that's something you definitely have to decide for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
The premium pass will continue for the next month in the same way that it was for the month of May. Um, More rewards, no ads, etc. It still remains the most cost effective way to spend money on the game. So maybe, maybe like we talked about before, maybe one of the extra bonuses like more friends list or no ads really appeals to you and you get it for the extra resources. And for that, that's every person's choice to make for themselves for sure.
Yeah. There also will be some new avatars if you do have a lot of resources and it's burning a hole in your pocket. And then there are some bug fixes, only one of which I think is important enough to note. I know this does cause some flaming posts in Reddit and in Discord. The infamous fourth card going missing from your hand bug is finally being resolved. I'm very excited about this because I've actually had to play about 3 or 4 games in my year plus of playing this game where I only have 3 cards. All right, so is that it in terms of what we want to talk about in the patch notes?
I think that's enough, man. That's a hefty
Whew.
set of patch notes. We talked about the balance changes probably more than it's really worth talking about. Unstable build is probably the only one that really sees some widespread usage, and so that'll be the most impactful. But I do hope people experiment with Ami. I hope I experiment with Ami. I'll definitely try to level up some of those cards and hang on to some gold from the last 3,000 coin chest that I'll ever get in the Heroes League.
I think you're right. There will be a lot of Ami experimentation on the first couple of days. If something sticks, it could become part of the meta. I don't think it'll dominate. But if nothing sticks, I think you're right. Unstable build will be the lasting change from this month. Moving on, I'm so excited about this. Our card of the week this week, Sabeka was kind enough to let me choose it. It is the one. It is the only. It is the Wet Sprocket. It is Toad the Elevated. It is from Shadowfen. Rarity, legend. Wait for it. Berry. Mana 4, strength goes 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Movement 1. But Subaiku, it's all about the effect, isn't it?
It definitely is. After attacking, jump in front of a random enemy unit or structure and gain 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 strength. So
Oof.
Toad survives an attack and he just doubles his strength. And then if he survives another attack, he'll jump around and gain strength again.
Yeah, I do have to say that one of the funniest things about playing in mirror matches when your opponent plays Toad, if you just drop Rain, it's kind of like round and round she goes where she stops nobody. No, Toad just jumps everywhere.
And that Toad
It's
is hopping all around the board.
There's a bit of a change log to this. It is worth noting that at one point it was a 6 mana card.
Yeah, 6 mana I think up to 12 strength, but with a vastly reduced ability. So now the total value ends up being about the same, but it does get a little bit harder to proc Toad's ability when you're playing against somebody else with all max levels. You know, you really do need something smaller on the board that you can take advantage of.
I will say I have finally gotten Toad to 4, but for since the start of the Heroes League, I had Toad at 3. The first month of trying to climb to the Heroes League, I actually did it with Toad at level 3.
3 is tough because at 5 strength, you know, if your opponent is playing max level gifted recruits, max level GPs, max level saber paws, like you're not even surviving a trade into their 2 strength, into their 2 mana or 1 mana units.
It's true. It's true. But what I was doing was I was dangling Dubious Hags. I would play Dubious Hags with Toad in hand, waiting for my opponent to clear it and get the 1 health unit. And this would allow me to maximize my Toad of value, right? Because now I trade into a 1 health unit, 5 down to 4, jump somewhere else, +5 up to 9.
Yep, which feels pretty good. So I was playing Toad at level 4, and I was
Mm-hmm.
actually having trouble getting it to work just because I was playing against so much Ironclad, and the board would be like Destructobots and Scrap Planners. I'm like, well, shoot, I can't trade into either one of those. That doesn't work.
Yeah, clean trades and Toad are bad. Um, the thing about Toad that I really like is that Toad is RNG. Right? Toad is overpowered for its mana because the RNG of it, you don't know where it's going to jump, you don't know where it's going to be. But when you learn how to manage that RNG in a way so that Toad only has one option of where it's going to jump because you stuck units in front of the bad options or you traded them away, um, there's a lot of cards like this. I really feel like Stormbound, the strongest cards are cards that have a little bit of RNG to them, but when you learn how to properly manage that RNG to your advantage, the outcomes are superior for you on average than any other card in the slot. And Toad falls right into that group.
Yeah, definitely a hard card to set up positionally. Like, I think it's pretty easy to understand the first step of, well, how do I make it go where I want it to go? And sometimes you can do that, and sometimes you can't. But it's harder to set the board up, definitely, to make sure that that's going to happen. Trying to think, 2 or 3 moves ahead. Well, I want to attack this side of the board now, so that he puts his unit over there, so that next turn I can be over here and play my Toad into whatever he trades with over there. So it goes back to the other side kind of deal. Like that's it's asking a lot to try to make that work. But when you can, and your Toad bounces all the way across the board, so you can put a runner into their base for lethal, it feels great.
Yeah, there was a board. My opponent had 2 units on the board. One was like a giant lady rhyme I was never killing, and the other was a unit on his. I think they were both on his second row. Lady rhyme was like in column 4. He had something else in column 2, and I didn't have anything that would clean trade the unit in column 2. It was my only path to get a runner in. And so I realized the only thing to do was to trade my Toad into the unit, let Toad jump out of the way, and now ta-da, I've got my column. But it was really cool to set it up so that Toad would trade and then jump out of the way. Like, ta-da! Now I got my runner spot. I was very proud of it at the time. I might be misremembering it now, but at the time I thought, gosh, that was such a cool way to win a game, was to clear with Toad, get him out of the way, and then ta-da.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. It's a unique effect, right? Like Toad so rarely will get to your opponent's baseline because he's hopping all around the board or he gets cleared. But the fact that you can kind of control the hopping around the board a little bit and make it go where you want it to, it makes it strong.
Yeah,
Definitely a good value generator. Definitely a flexible card that can fit in almost any Shadowfen deck. It's fun.
I like that we had a conversation earlier today about how Headless Hotheads plays with this sort of movement concept in this game, which makes it so unique. And now we come full circle to Toad, who also just plays with movement in a completely different way. These are fun cards. This is a fun way to play the game. So, yeah, if you haven't tried Toad Out, give it a shot. Even if you feel like it's under leveled, I recommend trying to use your hags the turn before as a setup for it, or even the same turn if there's something good to trade into. And good luck. That's going to end the main portion of this episode, which means it's time for me to remind you to contact us, preferably in our channel on the Stormbound Discord server or on Twitter at Brewed Sages. You can also email us at thebrewedsages@gmail.com. And now we have an additional way for you to reach out and support us. We have a Gumroad account where you can become patrons of our work. Check that out. Our link is on Stormbound Kitty on our homepage. This week we heard from Joshua H1845, who says, "Thanks for the great video, guys." MKM says, "Not gonna lie, best episode ever." Well, that's only because you were on it, sir. Supla Law One says, "When you roast MKM at the start of the episode," I know it is the most enjoyable thing that I do in every episode is making fun of MKM using email.
And it's even better when he's part of it.
It really is. He was there to receive it. That's going to do it for this episode. For Sabaiku, I am Freeloader. We are the Brewed Sages reminding you to stay hydrated.